no, I'm not going to do this. But I did do it for 2.5 years consistently, roughly. At my worst, I was cutting once a week or more. But since that time, I cut back my cutting. I haven't cut yet this year. And last year I cut maybe 3 or 4 times. The year before that, 3 to 5 times. So, what started this? What started this was I was a gay individual living in a small town. I had nobody else to talk to. I felt very alone. I didn't do drugs. I didn't have sex. I didn't drink. I didn't commit crime. And I spent a lot of time writing, but I couldn't get all my feelings out. So I turned to this. Because somehow, when I took this, and I cleaned it with alcohol, and I cleaned my skin, and I drugged this across that patch of skin where I had cleaned, it let loose all those feelings. It helped get rid of them. As for my I always cut on the left side of my body, because left is seen as evil, right? At least in mythology. Emmanuel of Nazareth sat on the right hand of Yahweh, the God of the Abrahamic religions. I cut my forearm, I cut my shoulder, I cut over my heart, and I cut my thigh. Yahweh says, cut off that which makes you sin. So cutting over my heart would have symbolically cut out my heart, right? I cut because I had no other way to get out the feelings. I cut because somehow, in my mind, it was punishing myself for being who I was. I spilled my own blood because somehow it made me feel more alive. You're alive if you bleed, right? Or at least that's how I felt. That's how a scared little 19-year-old felt. Back 5 years ago. When I got into my freshman year of college, I learned about Thanatos and Logos, Freud's theories of love and death. And so when I would have my moments and I would go into the bathroom at school and I would go through my ritual of cleaning my blade and my skin, as I was dragging this thing across my skin, I would think, this is an act of Thanatos, an act of death, because I felt dead inside. Because I was in an environment where I was being told I was this dirty, nasty, disgusting thing. I was told that I was a sin, just for being who I was. That I was born a sin, that Yahweh made a mistake, or that I had been cursed from before I was born. That was the environment I grew up in. That's what I came to believe about myself. Beyond that, it didn't make it any easier that I was hearing the phrase, "that's so gay," or derogatory terms like faggot around me. It didn't help that my sibling was also going through a rough time and I was having to watch my sibling treat my parents like crap. Or that I was struggling in a couple of my classes. None of that helped. I had no other way to get rid of those feelings. Those feelings of like I was born this demon, or like I was dead inside, or like I was not human. You're human if you bleed, right? Or at least that's how it felt in my mind. All those feelings I couldn't get out any other way. I turned to this. But want to know what's surprising? In the summer between my senior year of high school and my freshman year of college, I was living with my aunt and uncle. My agnostic aunt, my atheist uncle, and I didn't cut once. I was in a different environment. I was surrounded by mostly adults, and I didn't hear a word about Bible this, Bible that. I was in an environment where I could really grow, and where I was treated like an adult. and expected to be like an adult, and I rose to the challenge. When I got back my freshman year, it was rough because my dad and I were clashing heads even more than my senior year of high school. It was just a bad time in my life. I mean, part of it is just like I was in that gap time between being a kid and being an adult, and my parents and I were still kind of learning our new roles, my parents being mentors and me being a mentee. It was just, I had a lot of feelings that I had no other way to get rid of other than this. And I knew that it wasn't healthy, but I also know that this was a whole lot safer than alcohol or drugs. Or at least in my mind it is. I mean, a couple of slashes on your body, and you know if you go too deep, you know that you could nick something and bleed to death. Versus if you drink too much, you fry your brain. If you do drugs too much, you fry your brain. So yeah, numerous times in the bathrooms of the school I was going to, I stood in the stall and I cleaned my blade and I cleaned my skin and I cut. And then I would take a bandana and I would just wrap it around so it would be all nice and tight, and so I didn't bleed out. I mean, I never bled more than a little bit, but still, it was just seeing my blood, my own blood, was a way to remind me that I was still alive, that I was still human. Then, same thing the next summer I spent with my aunt and uncle. I didn't cut once. And in that second summer, I believe, it came out that I told my aunt and uncle that I had turned to self-mutilation as a way to get out my feelings. And you know what my father did? He sent me a little religious book saying that this is going to solve all your problems. Are you kidding me? It was that religion that I felt was causing most of my problems. So yeah, I didn't read that book because frankly my father had no idea what he was talking about. But my sophomore year of college, it did get a little bit better. I rearranged my schedule so that I was in that town where I went to school from 9 o'clock in the morning till 9 or 10 o'clock at night. I didn't see my folks that much. I worked in that town where I went to school, and so again, I would leave in the morning before I had a chance to talk to my folks, and I wouldn't get back till late at night. And I mean, things did get better with my family at that time, but to me a big thing of it was I was staying out of that environment. And then when I went to BG, this dropped from once a week to once every couple of months, because I was in an environment where I had a support system. I could talk to professors, I could talk to people who had been in a small town and who were gay, or who were part of a not so socially acceptable group, atheists, pagans, and whatnot. For me, it took getting out of that environment for this to stop. And, you know, once I got out of that environment, I was able to step back and look and see what my triggers were. And I did a little bit of research about how to limit my need to turn to this. And like what the websites say is like, okay, if you feel that urge to cut, wait a half an hour, and then say, okay, if I feel like cutting, then I'll cut. And another part of it with me was I've got hypoglycemia, so when my blood sugar's low, I get really bitchy and really depressed. So if I felt like cutting, I learned, okay, I'm going to get something to eat and I'm going to wait a half an hour, and if I still feel like cutting, then yes, I will. Because going off of anything cold turkey is a dumb idea, at least in my opinion. But I learned how to wean myself back from self-harm to the point where here we are 5 years on from my senior year of high school and my worst times, And I have not cut this year. Last year I cut maybe 3 or 4 times. The year before that I cut maybe 3 to 5 times. So, you know what? It is possible to get out of it. You learn what your triggers are. You get out of that environment. You find people that you can talk to. You find ways to get out those feelings other than turning to this. I know some people who have gotten therapy for it, and it helps. For others, it's just that change of environment that helps. So I don't really know what more to say about this. This is my own story of battling the blade. I don't rip on, and I don't think badly of anybody who turns to this, because from my perspective, if it's a choice between getting addicted to drugs and alcohol or turning to this, I think that this is a little bit lesser of the evils. That's my story. Again, if you struggle with this, I highly encourage you to get help, or at least do that. Give yourself time between the urge and the act, because if you have that cool down period, you might not really feel like doing it. I will link below a website that might be able to offer you some help and some thoughts, and really some stuff to think about. And again, I hope this helps. This is Raven Blaze. Peace out.